Well, welcome everyone to tonight's presentation. I'm happy to see so many familiar faces and new ones as well. Tonight we are joined by Glenn Wallace, a cemetery archivist who merged his love of genealogy and history in his 33-year commitment to researching cemeteries and their social significance. His past 14 years have been dedicated to archiving the Monocacy Cemetery in Bealsville, and tonight he will share his expertise in a mini masterclass about cemetery preservation. Reminder, please remain muted during the presentation. You can send any questions you have throughout in the chat, and as always, there will be an opportunity at the end to unmute for a Q&A. And make sure, if you enjoyed tonight's event, to check out poolsvilleseniors.org and register to join us for some more upcoming events. Without further ado, Glenn, take it away.
Okay, and I'll ask you to just check to make sure that you're seeing the cover for the presentation.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you once again for inviting me back to speak with you. I'm learning so much from just this little group than I have in almost 10 years hanging out, almost, oh my God, almost 20 years hanging out in the Poolsville area. But this evening's conversation is a branch off of one that I've done earlier on the archiving of Monocacy Cemetery. This one is a more generalized conversation here about preserving historic cemeteries. The people who, I guess, as we're meeting tonight, who literally fall in love with the idea of going into a cemetery and cleaning it up because it's there and it has to be done, are very few and very rare. And there are basic rules for doing that. You just don't pull your car over on the side of the road and go swinging with axes and weed whackers. There's a protocol that you would like to keep in mind, that it's property and it isn't yours, but you're there to help with that property. So what I am coming on this side here, and there we go. What I basically do when asked to go evaluate a cemetery is do a little kind of front research, looking it up on Google Maps, doing the Google aerial map, zooming in, and kind of get familiar with the area to see if there's any houses or anything around the area. But when most of these tiny family cemeteries that we've been seeing popping up in the past 3 years, basically in Montgomery County, for those outside of Montgomery County, I worked on the cemetery inventory back in 2018, and we discovered 55 new cemeteries in that 1 year. But most on the scale of a small family cemetery on an old family farm. But when you're, let me get rid of that. When you are approaching a cemetery, you want to, I'm not following my mouse. There we go. Be prepared to find the unexpected. You think a cemetery might be, this pretty church cemetery with all the stones standing upright, all in a nice row. But if you look at the picture on your left, that is one of the cemeteries that we had to work on. And it was an effort and totally unexpected. We were not prepared the first time we went there to do any work at all. Look deeper and be prepared to research. What you see in this picture is years, decades of falling leaves, decaying, broken limbs falling, poison ivy everywhere. These are things that are would make the shy people turn and get back in their car. Not me. I look forward to this kind of thing. Prepare to engage. Like I said, if you know that there's a neighbor around or a house or a farm in the area, don't be afraid of pulling up the driveway, going up and knocking on the front door, because they might have some information that could be helpful to you. Who might be buried there, the family, who owned the farm, all that. Not that you're guaranteed to find any gravestones with those particular names on them, but they might remember, 50 years ago that there was a clearing in that area. But as you see, nature will always win. Trees will grow, grass will rise, weeds will start covering everything. And then we come along 100 years later and we're like, I think there's a cemetery there. So we go in. Prepare to be astounded. Some of the things that you might find as you're starting the clearing is a finished stone. Might be face down, but it's a smooth surface. And you know you're on your mark there. Right now, I'll just tell you now, don't touch the stone. Just clear away the debris around the stone. There's no need to touch the stone at this point. You are a basic volunteer going in to do a nice cleanup job. But I say it over and over and over again, do no harm. It is very, very important that you don't disturb the stones that have fallen, because you might end up cracking them if you try to lift them, or they might splinter. You be careful about limbs hanging up over your head. You don't want to shift anything that's going to cause that thing to come crashing down and you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere with a tree limb across you. So do no harm to this particular location. I would ask, I know she muted everybody, but I ask why people want to do this. Why do you want to go in and preserve a cemetery? Is it a civic duty? If you see something that is historic to your particular town or village, and you think, wow, I just can't believe that the township would let this go like this. You want to get in there and do your best to restore it to 100% the way it was before. Do you want to assist a family in discovering their history? Like I said, family farms are definitely, what, 55 of them. We still haven't been able to get back in there to help them clear out what is overgrown, to see exactly who is buried there. What about helping out a town or a church with their record keeping? They might know that there's a cemetery there, but they haven't been able to maintain it. That's a great opportunity for a community to come together and step up, make it a cleaning day or a cleaning week, and everybody does a little bit, and then soon enough, you know, everything's cleared out and you're staring at a cemetery that hasn't basically seen the light of day in decades. Volunteering, 100%. I deal with volunteers. I love getting a group together to go out and work on a cemetery. There's a love, and we've heard from a few of you that there's a love of cemeteries. It's a very odd thing to share at a family dinner or a reunion, but I do it all the time, and people are astounded. They want to hear that instead of what you're doing at work. SSL hours for school students. We do that all the time. If they are willing to come out for an hour, you'd be amazed at what you can get done in an hour. Or as with myself, it's a personal hobby. If I have a free Saturday, a couple hours on a Saturday, and I know my destination throughout the county, there's plenty to work on, I will just head out there. To me, it's time well spent. I'll give a couple examples up in the beginning here of what is possible with a volunteer doing just the basics, clearing debris. This is a cemetery in Barnesville, Maryland, that I came across almost 16 years ago, and I needed to locate somebody who was buried there because their spouse was buried up at Monocacy Cemetery. Knew nothing about this. To find it on a residential property made it even more confusing. And it's across from the Catholic cemetery, so I couldn't understand why there would be two different cemeteries at that time. So with a little cleaning, this project took 3 years. With a little cleaning of the area, we discovered that the cemetery was in a disaster state. All but 3 stones were broken, were sheared off, either backed over by a car or vehicle, because I originally found vehicles parked on top of this. There was burning barrels with the stones being used. And we also discovered that one of the previous owners had buried a lot of the broken off stones just to get them out of sight. So some of the volunteers from Barnesville showed up, and we did a probing around to see if we could tap on something, and we discovered the stones that you see in the foreground here. And we found elements of funerary coffin handles. We found wrought iron gate posts. You can see that there was a little gate surrounding that tree, but apparently in the upper right, there was more family fenced in areas, and our volunteers down the bottom. So you see that from the left, that's what we were working with. And by the end of the project, that is the current state of this cemetery. We basically brought it up into not, I wouldn't say a restoration, but this was a rehabilitation. We didn't reset the stones upright. We placed them on a bed of gravel, so they're safer down than up. And this, I think, was a great project to work on. And I think quantity-wise, we maybe had 15 or 16 volunteers do this. Another example in Olney, Maryland, it was called out to a family property. The man bought the house, and he had trees, woods behind the house, and he was foraging through the woods with his dog, and he saw some bases that you see here, and he he asked us what we could do. He asked the coalition, what could we do? And I went out there and I talked to him, and I said, well, it's a lot of work, but I guess if you start just clearing it. He took me for my word. He went out there with a vengeance, clearing fallen trees, cutting them up, creating pathways, clearing the areas around the stones. You can see the bases as we saw before, but the stones that had fallen off of them were now visible. And same with the Barnesville Cemetery. Over the decades, in this case, almost 160 years of debris falling from the trees, the leaves and the decayed leaves just turning into mush and mud and all that, burying a lot of the stones that were there. But I think he's done a tremendous job. He is continuing to do this to clear all the cut wood. And while I was there, another guy pulled up, and it turns out that he had done some research on findagrave.com and discovered that his fourth great grandfather was buried somewhere in this vicinity. And he saw us standing in the middle of this clearing, and he walked over, and he was standing on top of his fourth great grandfather's gravesite. Here's a Poolsville example. This was the Young Remsburg cemetery that on the cemetery inventory, it was listed as inventory ID number 1. And unfortunately, it was lost. Nobody knew where it was. And through the word of mouth, talking to the locals, it was brought around. We were able to visit this site, and we coordinated a volunteer day to come out and clean it up. We found these, what are they called? Orange Osage or Osage orange things, and fallen branches and everywhere. And we just decided we're just going to clear that off because we don't see the cemetery. It's very difficult to see anything there. So we just decided we were going to clean that up. And there it was. All of that was underneath decades of debris. And the next picture you see, what's kind of shocking is that group of volunteers, a couple had already left, but we did all of that work in 1 hour. That was a pretty intense hour, and the clearing, and this is what it looks like today. We do want to get back out there to visit it. We don't know, this was, I believe, 2.5 years ago. So we would like to see if we need to keep it up, develop some sort of maintenance plan for the homeowner, just to make sure that this thing is in this particular state here. What I'd like you to know, pertaining to how you as a volunteer can be involved with cemetery preservation. There are state laws that will guide the management of active cemeteries. Obviously, church cemeteries that are burying people left and right, and let's see, like public cemeteries, they're governed. They know everything is covered by law with those. But including in the next bullet down is criminal statutes related to desecration. Anybody who's desecrating a cemetery at this point is going to go to jail and be charged with a crime. But the third bullet is, to me, the most important. We now have Maryland state laws that provide a means of you getting into the property to work on a cemetery. And it's not a free pass by any means. You definitely need permission. You want to talk. You want to engage with the homeowner. and make sure that it's very, very clear that you're not going to sue him if if a branch falls on your head. You're not going to hurt or touch any of the stones that are there. Even if they're upright and you're like, oh, check this out, and you want to start cleaning that stone and that stone falls on you, that's on you. But you want to make that very, very, very clear with the homeowners or the property owners that you are there to do no harm. You just want to clear the debris so that then you can take the next step in preserving the family cemetery. That homeowner might not be aware that there are property tax credits available to them for restoring that cemetery because it's a historical asset. We in Maryland have the Maryland Historical Trust. They're on board now after the laws were passed to become conservation advisors. If you have questions about what you should be doing, there are people there at the Maryland Historical Trust who can help you, or you can just call me. Regulatory tools that's more of the governance of the property itself, that the cemeteries that we identified throughout the inventory are now located on what we have as the GIS mapping system through Montgomery Planning. So anytime a developer comes in and they want to build this huge monstrosity or a new development of houses, the Montgomery Planning pulls the property up, and he says, oh, wait, there's a cemetery on that property. Everything stalls at that point until the developer and the county work together to decide what is the best interest of that cemetery being preserved. We have one case in Germantown where they built the whole development around the cemetery. Actually, there's two now. So cemetery was untouched. They actually put a fence around it, and it's all good to go, and they're taking care of it. The tools also protect the cemetery in perpetuity. So like I said, that the cemeteries in Germantown, they're not going to be touched. They're there. People can go in, they mow the lawn, take care of it, paint the fence, whatever they're going to do. But those easements are allowing that cemetery to exist forever. I'm going to talk about my favorite thing right here. You have different ways of preserving cemeteries. You're going to go out and you think it's only about cleaning, but it's actually, it can get a little bit more involved than that. My forte right now is mapping. I map cemeteries simply because it gives whoever the property owner is, the church, a private owner, an idea of what they're dealing with. So the one I'm working on up in Harford County, the church records were basically just handed over to me, and I could not make sense of it. So the easiest thing to do is go out there and map it. And you're seeing an example of how I map, laying a grid out, photographing each one, and there's a technique slide coming up. But from this view here, you're seeing us mapping the cemetery. So eventually the owner is going to be handed a paper map and a PDF map that they can look up and zoom in online, and it will give them exactly what is present there now. A lot of reasons they do that is they don't know if there's any more burial sites available. So we're looking for like depressions in the ground, or if there's a field stone just randomly hanging out in the field here. In this particular one, there was a few. So we know that that was a marker, African-American burial. So this is a technique I developed for going out. It's very quick. I'll just run through it quickly. It's using rods and ropes. And I lay the rope out, I measure it out 50 by 50, do my diagonal and set that the other corner, lay down the posts, and the post laid down. And then I come through, add the ropes, and then you'll see in the lower corner there, I go through and I just photograph each square. It's important that we keep this all in order, and you do it in an order. And I draw whatever stones are within that square. And mind you, these are not plots. This is not the size of a plot. This is me using a 10-foot grid across the entire cemetery so I can draw it on grid paper. And then I'll develop that into a full-blown map using Adobe Illustrator. But here I am going slide by slide and drawing what is there and then transferring that onto my notes. A couple more examples of mapping techniques. And then this is basically the result that you get. It shows the existence of gravestones, depressions, burial depressions, plants. If you want to get that detailed, you can include trees that might be there, or stumps from trees, because these trees don't last forever. When they fall down, they break the stones, and that's what we want to record. What was there at that moment that I was there. Restoration. I will underscore what I said before, that you are not required, you're not allowed to go in and reset the stones you see in front of you. That's not your job. You can clear all the grass away from it. You can clear all the weeds away from it. If there's shrubbery growing up around it, feel free to clear that, but make sure that you're doing it safely around the stones. If the stone is standing and you're about to rip a vine off of it that has been growing there for decades, that stone might topple on you. So just forget the ivy, cut it at its base, it'll die on its own. But we want to leave stone repair to the professionals. This is just a quick example of one that we came across at Monocacy Cemetery. You'll see at the far left, at the base of the Brewer monument, that a whole bunch of broken pieces. And luckily, one of our board members was able to locate every single piece for that stone, including the one that it was broken off, that was still in the ground. This thing was very, very tall. And she was able to get it home and get it cleaned up and get the epoxy, and was able to reassemble it. This is the one that everybody can do. This is stone cleaning. Volunteers, whatever. Oh, look at all these words. Don't look at the words. If you have questions, I'll send you a list. I can email you this list. But these are just tools that you would want to bring with you to a cemetery or to a burial ground or graveyard. These are just essentials. Goggles. You don't want that stuff that you're cleaning off the stone spraying in your face. Bristle brushes, never metal brushes, ever. Never metal scrapers, never any metal at all. Water, tons of water. You're going to use lots and lots of water. And you see the plastic scrapers for getting the lichen off. And then the product on the end is D2, and we'll talk about that shortly. But right now, I'm just going to let this video run. I put this together for a DAR presentation. They wanted to do a stone cleaning, but it was winter and the ladies didn't want to come out when it was cold. So I said, I'll go out there, I'm going to take a video, and it became useful. This is now a tool that I can share with you. It runs about 10 minutes, so I'm just going to let it run. And this gives you an overview of cleaning a basic stone.
So the main purpose why we're here today is that we're going to basically do a simple cleaning of a gravestone. Nothing super technical about this. The only one rule that we go by is that we do no damage. We do not scrape or scar the stone. At any point, we're going to be using soft utensils to clean and water. That's it. No chemicals will be used at all. The first thing that we're going to want to do is put on some protective eyewear, because a lot of the stuff that is coming off of this stone here, you don't want to get in your face or into your eyes. So we'll use that. And you'll also notice I am wearing gloves. There's a lot of algae, lichen, and all that other stuff that's on there. You just don't want that on your skin. So please use protective gloves. The tools I'm going to be using are a simple bristle brush. This is a fuller bristle brush, or a nylon brush. We never, ever, ever use a metal wire brush, ever. You can use a toothbrush for getting in the fine details here in the lettering. But we're going to begin with just a plastic scraper. For now, I want to get something off of here and just get the surface slightly cleaned off, not doing any heavy scrubbing. I'm holding the stone to make sure that it is stable in place. And I just want to get the grass clippings away from the stone. You don't want those wet. So that's just basically a quick dry thing. Next is we're going to use water to wet it. We need to have this stone soaking wet to begin working. So starting at the top, what this is doing is it's taking this algae here and it's soaking the roots. It's getting those roots wet, because once they're wet, we can easily remove them. A lot of water is used in this process here. Only water. Okay. This is soaked in for just a couple minutes. Let it go. And we're going to begin with our scrub brush. I'm holding the stone to make sure it's stable. Okay. You never want to push on it and knock the stone over. So make sure it's stable. And we're going to start at the top and just small, even, circular motion. This is loosening up, and I'm already getting the flicked stuff onto me. Couple rounds of this. Just keep going for a minute. Okay. I'm going to take the water again. I want to rinse this layer off. I'm using a garden pump sprayer. Simple. You can get them at Home Depot for about $10. And just start rinsing. Rinsing is very important. You're going to use a lot of water on this process here. And you can begin to see all of this is just starting to drain off. Okay. That's just our first scrubbing. And it's already done this much work. Okay. I'm going to take my regular bristle brush here, and I'm going to get over the stone. A little bit more pressure on this one, holding the stone. I'm going to come back to this detail in here with the toothbrush, just to get the fine nooks and crannies in here. I want to also mention, you're doing the stone through the base as well. Even down here, the base is going to have a lot of lichen on it. So you want to give that a good simple scrubbing. For this demonstration, I'm basically doing the front, but please, when you're out there and you're working on these stones, do all four sides, because eventually the lichen that you leave will make its way around. So let's rinse again. It's great because you can start to see the white of this marble. Occasionally, you're going to see stuff such as this. That could be bird droppings. It could be elements. If there was a tree nearby, the tree is dropping leaves or tar pitch, and it's getting onto the stone. It's very difficult to clean off, but it's okay for you to do your cleaning effort and just to leave that. Time to rinse off your brush so you're not bringing the dirt back on to the stone. Just slam it. Look at that. This is actually reaching down into the letters of the stone. So I could be using a toothbrush to get everything down in there, especially, let's go back up into here. When you see the level of detail of the carving here, you want to be very delicate with your cleaning process. Don't jam your toothbrush, or if you have tongue depressor, wood things, and you're trying to scrape that off, be very, very gentle in these areas. Doesn't take a lot to get this dirt off. Okay, let's rinse. Look at that. The best part is you see all of this just draining off of here. Okay. Now, the stone right now looks a little dark, but as this thing's sitting in the sun, it's going to dry, and it will start whitening up a bit. Don't worry about that. Take a break, take a 15-minute break, and come back. If it still looks a little dirty, go ahead. Just keep cleaning it until you're satisfied. Stone is starting to dry. I should have mentioned that we're working on a marble stone here. Predominantly, these are very, they will get a lot dirtier quicker than, say, a granite stone, the typical granite stones that we see today. So it's a very old white marble. It has age. You can see there's remnants at the base that are whiter than the stone itself. There is a product called D2, which is a biological solution that is approved by cemetery associations to use on white marble. Most notably, you would see this done at Arlington National Cemetery to keep their white stones pure white. So in this instance, I'm going to be spraying this with D2. What that's going to do is it's going to infiltrate all of the algae that I could not lift out of the stone, and will get to that algae and destroy it. And it will stay, it will make the stone originally, as I spray on, as it begins to work, it's going to turn this stone a little bit orange. Don't worry about that. That's just the biological solution kicking in. And I'm soaking it. I prefer not to, some people will use this solution as the cleaning agent, but for me, I just prefer to soak the stone, let it go on there. I'll use a very light scrubbing mechanism here, with just a brush, to make sure it's getting into all surfaces here. I'm not scrubbing the stone, I'm just moving the solution around. Can you see that it's already turning orange? You hear? The stone, it's not just coloring the stone permanently. This is just the live bacteria in this, the enzymes working on this. So what's going to happen is this is going to start drying. It'll just keep working, and this will keep working for about a month, eating at that algae. Eventually, I'll come back here in a month's time, and this stone will be as white as this base, and then we're done. So if you have any questions about cleaning gravestones, I can be reached at mococems@gmail.com. That's MOCOCEMS@gmail.com. And I'd be more than willing to help you out. If you would like to schedule a cleaning workshop with your group, reach out to me at that same email address. I want to thank you very much for watching this video.
Okay, and we're back. Just a couple examples here. I'm reading through the questions. That's why I kept stalling. Thank you, Dottie, for putting that email up. Here's just a couple examples of stones that we have worked on. You'll notice John Poole there, founder of Poolesville. He's buried at Monocacy Cemetery. And then the Poole family off on the right side, the before and the after, the Lewis stone with the lichen that was literally just encrusting this whole stone here. Other examples, what you're seeing on the left, that is seasonally, that is probably about now, around November, December area, where all of that lichen just starts to dry out and die, but it doesn't leave the stone. It just turns into this flaky orange, like sugary substance. And that's typically when I would go out cleaning stones. I love this time of year because a lot of the work is already done. I just have to use my plastic scraper to pull that off and then begin the cleaning. But you can see these are the stones in the restored or in the clean phase. Looks like they were just carved recently. And here's our volunteers. This is it's a fun project if you're trying to spend a sunny day outside. This is a great opportunity to do this. And we will be having workshops, and I'll be posting workshops as soon as this as the COVID thing is lifting and we can gather more as groups. We used to do this all the time, so I would like to kind of get back to doing that again. But that is the end of the presentation. Again, my email at the bottom, mocosems@gmail.com. Anybody can reach me at that point or that email address. And I am taking questions, and I'm going to scroll back through some of these questions that were asked. And if you would like to, ask a question, there's a raise hand feature on this thing. And actually, let me stop sharing that. So we are back now. And if Dottie, if you would like to release people's to unmute, that would be great. I can answer some of your questions
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. Feel free to unmute and ask your questions or send them in the chat as well.
I'm just going to run quickly through the chat questions. Have you used USGS Topo quad maps? Definitely, especially when we were doing the inventory, they were very helpful. Most notably, they would put it'd say CEM in a little square or something, or a dot. And believe me, a lot of the planning people in the county already knew about that. So my job was done. I just had to basically look. Thanks, Jack. It's great to see you.
You too.
Do you feel it is better to lay the headstone flat or to try to repair it? When I was working on Barnesville, I didn't have a choice. A lot of the stones that were sheared, they literally just backed the truck over the top, so it's sheared at the base. There was nothing left to put in the ground. Otherwise, I would be burying all the information. So in that instance, I preferred to lay them flat. Larger stones that historically would just sit on a pedestal base, and it has pins up underneath it to hold if it had one pin or two pins, and the stone has fallen. If you're lucky, the pin is still in that stone. It's possible that you can get somebody out there with the craning mechanism to elevate it and reset it. But for now, again, don't touch the stones. It's not really that important. If it's face down, you're kind of out of luck. You're not going to know who that person is. Don't try rolling the stone because you could literally just crack it. But if it's face down, if it's fallen face up, go ahead, grab a picture of it for posterity, put it on findagrave.com. If everybody's familiar with that. If you're not, let me know and we'll get you to www.findagrave.com. Thousands, millions of gravestones are now on there. If you had any experience with dowsing for burials, secretly, yes. I love it. It's the freakiest thing, and I literally, I just want to light a candle every time I get my little dowsing rods out, and you hold them really steady and you start walking forward, and once those things start going and you feel the cold air coming around your neck, you're like, okay, yeah, this stuff is really cool. I love it. And we use it. That sounded so stupid, but I've seen it done. We do it a lot, and when we're about to dig a grave, honestly, our caretaker gets out there and he has the divining rods, and sure, as soon as they cross, he knows that's where he can't dig. So as soon as it opens up again, that's where he's going to dig. There's other technical ways of figuring out grave sites as well. What should you use on sandstone? Nothing. Don't touch sandstone. Leave it alone. Wait for the season to cool down a lot, like where you see what I showed you. November, December is a great prime gravestone cleaning period. You want a lot of that stuff to die off first, so you're not really having to work very hard. If you do it in the springtime or in summer, where the heat is just making that algae grow faster, don't bother. These are your winter projects. But if it's under 55 degrees, don't go out cleaning. Don't be spraying any D2 on anything. D2 won't work. You want it to a nice sunny day above 55 degrees. That's basically your limit right there. Do you have permission from a cemetery before you go in to clean? Yes, 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 yes. If you're, as our friend up north was saying, that driving along down the street and there's a cemetery and you don't know who to ask, you can delicately approach a neighbor and let them know what you're about to do or what you would like to do, and if they might have a contact of somebody who you can call, leave it at that for the beginning of it. If you get contacted back with permission, then you can go in, take pictures of it before and after, and share them with the neighbors or share them with the owner, just so that there's a record of what was being done. But permission should always be granted. Rolling down here, interesting. Oh, the stone facing the same direction as the next ones. It's funny. Our cemetery is northwest or north-south and then east and west for no reason at all. These stones will just flip like that. I don't get it. I did some learning about cleaning stones. I was told that when discoloring at the start was to be called the blush. I didn't know that, the blush. My email, and do you recommend? Simple Green is another product that you can use, and there's another one that is called Wet and Forget, but I don't use them. I haven't used them. I trust the technology behind D2 only because they're using it for our veterans down at Arlington National. So to me, that's the one I use often. But the other one, Simple Green and Wet and Forget, they're available at, I believe, Home Depot or any home store. But I don't know, just be wary of it. Citrus shield developed by a man who removed tree sap. Oh, from Hawaiian trees. Okay. Did not know that. Citrus shield. I will definitely write that down. I know we don't have any tropical Hawaiian trees here in Maryland, but that's a different story there. Any recommendations for rust stains from flower hardware? That's a hard one. Rust is, the color itself embeds into the stone itself. It gets into the molecules of the stone. It's not like a living organism that, like we've just seen with the D2, it will remove that. The rust stains, I don't know. There might be, what is it? It's like a gum or something, or a putty that can be used, that you lay it on there and you just press it in and leave it for a day or two. And then when you peel that off, it should pull some of the rust stain out. I haven't used it. It's 6 inches of topsoil. You're currently working on a cemetery with markers buried under 6 inches of topsoil. Is there a GPR available? Yeah, GPR. Christmas is coming. If you all want to collectively get me a GPR system, I would love you forever. They run about $20,000. A GPR, ground penetrating radar system, is used. It looks like a lawnmower, and it basically vibrates across the ground. And if there's any disturbance in the soil, imagine that you've dug a grave, you put the dirt back in, that's called a disturbance. So as this thing is going across the ground on normal ground, up deep, and then it comes back, you know that there's been activity there. GPR is not about finding bodies. It's about soil disturbance or buried elements like pipelines or electrical lines or plumbing lines. That's mostly where that technology started. And somebody very, very, very clever came across and said, I wonder if that thing could find a coffin. And sure enough, a whole new industry was born. But again, I would love one. Thank you. I'll send you my address. You're going to love dowsing. Please, everybody just go to Amazon and buy dowsing sticks and walk around your living room for a bit. And it's just fun. If you find a body in your living room, win. They early years. Okay. It's a good way to remove black industrial soot. That I would say, especially near high traffic zones, highways and stuff, it's basically the same thing. It's not a live organism. So removing like you see, and they've cleaned all of Rome. So I'm sure you could do it. If they could get the white stones of Rome clean because of all of their leaded gas emissions all over the buildings, I'm sure there is a product that will do it. I just can't afford it, and I've never used it. But that's all the questions on the chat. If anybody else has any other questions, I would be more than willing to.
I see Allison has a question if you'd like to unmute.
Hey, kind of a question, kind of not. You brought up about permission.
Yes.
So both times I contacted first the town. I called the town clerk and then talked to the town supervisor. The smaller cemetery, if y'all want to look at it, it's called Glass Road, like as in like glasses, Glass Road Cemetery in the town of Rutland, New York.
Okay.
Rutland.
Okay. We can look that up on Find a Grave, right?
Yep, it is on Find a Grave. So to find out that it was an abandoned cemetery, so technically for New York, it falls to the town for maintenance. And I did a lot of digging trying to find out because there is no records. The only records is from 1934. Somebody just reading the stones and making a list. So that's it. I called the church, the First Baptist Church up here, and they didn't even realize that there was a church in front of that cemetery before.
Yeah, happens all
like
the
that's
time.
where your congregation came from, but okay.
All the time.
So, and with the wet and forget, so the preservation something, and I'm sorry, it's late. I worked all day. They did a 7-year study for the Arlington National Cemetery, looking at the different things to use. D2 was the number one, which is also $30 or $42 a gallon.
That's down to 60.
The second choice, which is still acceptable per that standard, was wet and forget, which you can get at like Walmart for 22 or so a gallon. I used a lot, like the 1,000 that I did, most is wet and forget because I was buying this all myself. Yep. I could not afford, not even close. So, but wet and forget is acceptable and is within the parameters with do no harm per the whole research project that they did. I just wanted to let you guys know.
That's awesome. Thank you, Allison.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for doing what you're doing.
You know, my kids were at camp and my son was a counselor. My daughter went to camp or was with grandma, and my husband works at FedEx. So, you know, it's like, I
need a hobby.
I get home, nobody's home. So I'm like, what can I do?
I love it.
Might as well do something productive.
I love it. Yes, Dave.
Yeah, I was in reference to the question about the industrial suit. I think that D2 will do a good job on that. And D2 actually keeps on working. You go there next year and the stone is a lot cleaner, a lot whiter than it was when you finished up cleaning it. So I think D2 will do a good job on the black suit.
It is quite expensive, and I just throw this in here. Don't use D2 as the cleaning agent. Water is the cleaning agent. Only water, not Windex, not shaving cream, nothing, no ammonia, just water is the only liquid you should be using on any gravestone. Ironically, we had done a fundraiser for D2, and a lot of people donated to the cemetery so we would have product to use. But some other people were actually ordering it for themselves to go out and do their cleanings. But one guy was actually pouring the D2 onto the stone to wet it and scrubbing and rinsing with D2. And I was like, that was a $60 a gallon wetting of a stone. It's like, please, you know, use it very sparingly. You saw it. I just sprayed with this spray. It just, you don't need a whole lot. It does magic. Anybody else? I see a Zoom user with a hand up. I don't know who the Zoom user. Anybody?
Feel free to unmute if you've put your hand up and you have a question.
Go.
Glenn, I don't have a question, but please keep us updated for those of us that live in the community about where you're working for cleaning or, cleaning out brush or cleaning the stones themselves.
Okay.
We would love to put on Poolsville Seniors. We do a blast every Monday morning. We do put it on our website to seek volunteers. We would love to help with that.
And I'm really
Awesome.
I'm eager to get beyond the COVID so that we can do this in larger groups. Right now,
I think because we're outside, can't we?
but we're all together. That's, there's still that, in my head, there's still that proximity thing that we can't be sitting next to each other and bumping elbows and all that. But if we're in a larger environment that we could, like 2 people could work on one stone over here and whatever, we can do that. But give me some time. I'm going, I can't go through another year without cleaning a stone. So I will come up.
I think that we have people that would help. I mean, we can wear masks, we can do the social distancing, and we're happy to advertise that for you.
Wonderful.
We would love to do that.
Hey, Glenn.
Yes. I hear Tom.
Yeah, I'm on the cemetery board with Glenn and my wife. One thing that I want to make abundantly clear: no pressure washers.
Nope.
They will destroy. They will take the lettering right off the stone. Yep. D2, great. Scrub brush, that's great, but no pressure washers.
Thank you, Tom. Yes. Can you imagine it? You go to do all that work. You're like, I got a pressure washer, and you go out and you destroy the stone, and you're going home and you're like, that was a fail.
Glenn,
Yes.
it's Lisa. Do you
Hi,
do
Lisa.
hi? Do you do one application of D2?
I've only ever done one. If I come back a month later, and it still has a tinge of green back in the stone, I'll hit it again. Like I said, I like doing it in the late autumn, early winter, and then pick it up back shortly before spring in like March. And that way I'm getting what is currently embedded in the stone and prepping that stone for any growth that might come forward as it starts warming up. If I see some green on that in March or April, I'll hit it again just to cut it at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Glenn.
Yes.
Jack here. One of my genealogy Facebook pages I follow, a gentleman had bought an old property down in Southwest Virginia, came to find that he had an old cemetery on the property.
Love that.
And he was trying to make out, all he was trying to do was make out the lettering on the stones, and they were laying flat in the ground.
Okay.
And somebody suggested he brush flour across it. Was he doing any damage? And it did, you could much easily read, but is that doing any damage to the stone?
Flour, other than inviting like insects to now crawl on top of that stone when you're done, I don't know that. A trick that I use now more than ever in this age of LED lighting is it's a light bar. It's about 18 inches long, and it's an LED light, like a flashlight, but it's flat. And all you literally need to do, and I'm going to come up with a really quick improvisational here. You have a stone and it's sitting in the dark or something, and you can't read the letters as you're facing it.
Right.
Use the light and stick it right on the very side, like, so you're shining the light across the stone, not onto the stone, but across the face of it. And that light, the light, as you move that around, you're going to see the shadows of the recesses of the lettering much easier. And go with 2 people, so one can hold the light, and then you can take the picture, because it's impossible to hold the light and take a picture at the same time. Or set the light up somehow. The other thing is the oddest thing that's in my car, in my repertoire of tools. I have one of those stupid mirrors that you get at like Target that you put on the back of your closet door so you can check yourself out. And it's a tall one, it's 48 inches long. Carry that in your car. And when you get a nice sunny day, you just use that and you just keep moving it until it hits the stone exactly where you want it. The sun is going to give you a much better shadow, light across the stone than an LED, by the way, especially on a sunny day. The LED seems to not be as bright, but yeah, use the sun and mirrors. Just don't scorch any ladybugs, please.
Okay, Glenn, I have a question.
Yes.
I've cleaned a lot of white marble stones
Yes.
with the D2 and they look great, later, but
Yeah.
they have these little spots of black stuff that looks like tar. And I have not found anything that would take that off. I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, I would say curse the birds. I always curse the birds first, because gravestones are great to perch on and do your business. And unfortunately, that stuff that is so full of, well, you know what it's full of, but it's just once the sun starts baking that, and then the stone is absorbing the moisture from it, and the sun's baking, and it just becomes a mess.
Yeah, it's just like tar. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah, and it's very difficult. We also noticed that on gravestones that are underneath cedar trees. For some reason, cedar trees, as they go through their season, they start dropping the fragments of their branches, and
like
anything
sap.
that rests on top, the sap immediately, dying cedar just.
Well, I'll just ignore it from here on out.
Yeah, just move the camera to a slightly where you can't see it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, Beth.
I also saw a question in the chat asking about who are the local professionals that would be able to reset a fallen stone.
I see shaking head. You'd have to contact any monument company. They would be able to set you up. Obviously, they have the means of setting a gravestone. They probably have the means to reset a gravestone.
Glenn?
I have
Yes,
one more.
Mary, sorry, go ahead.
When you were talking about being able to read an old stone, once we went up to Hancock and we found a stone that we wanted the information from and we couldn't read it, and we didn't have any, we tried flashlights and whatever, but I saw a technique where you take aluminum foil and you put it over top of the stone and brush around a circular motion, and I came home with the impression of that stone, and I kept it in a cardboard box till I got to the family that wanted to read it, and then they could actually read the stone.
Yes,
And
and actually,
yeah.
I've done it. It's a great trick. It's just tin foil, aluminum foil. Keep a roll in your car, and not a soft makeup brush like the big wide makeup brushes, but if you can find an artist brush with the same size, a large brush, it just presses what you need. It just starts pressing the foil into the letters. The reason it's so difficult to read gravestones is because of the texture. Sometimes, I mean, white stones are obviously very easy to read, but if you have a granite stone or something, or an aged stone, that texture starts marbling a bit and it gets dark spots and light spots, and then it just makes it very confusing. Tin foil or aluminum foil and pressing with a brush, just you can easily tape the aluminum foil with painter's tape onto the stone, start pressing in, and then just remove it, and you'll be amazed.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. Any other questions? Now that Annie has started, we're all recording it.
I'd like to add one more thing.
Yes,
when I was taught how to clean the gravestones with the D2, they would put them in the pump up sprayer and spray the tombstones with that. But I noticed a lot of it would get in the air and I would breathe it and everything. So I started just using a small paint roller and putting mine in just a little bit in a little bucket. And I just roll it on the stones because it makes me feel like all of it's getting on there and it's not, I'm not losing any in the air or breathing it. So I've
also use a sponge, just use a soft sponge and just soak it.
I've not thought of that. Yeah.
Walk away.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Beth.
Thanks.
Thank you for championing. Any other?
Oh, I wondered too. I had one more question. Are you familiar with Chris Haley? He works at the University of Maryland, and I think he's a nephew of Alex Haley that wrote Roots.
Okay.
And he's got a documentary out now on slave cemeteries.
Oh,
And I'm from Indiana, and we're actually working on a slave cemetery right now,
okay.
cleaning it all out, you know, and everything. I just noticed that you were from Maryland, so I thought, well, maybe you had met him before and was familiar with his work.
I heard about the documentary. I wasn't familiar with who the director or the author was. Yes.
Okay.
That right there, the African American cemeteries are probably the most difficult ones to find, especially if you want to go clean one out. You're not looking for gravestones, you're looking for field stones. So you can be in the woods and see field stones laying in the woods for some reason, and that could be an African American burial ground. You just don't know.
Yeah, the cemetery that we're working on is he bought his freedom in Maryland, and he moved to Indiana.
Wow.
So, and he had like 80 acres, and that's where the cemetery's at. Where
Fantastic.
So it's not your typical slave cemetery because they all have nice stones and everything, but it's really a neat story. And it's on Find a Grave too.
Love hearing that. Just imagine, you know, we're doing what we're doing now for people who died over 100 years ago, and they probably never had a thought when they were going in the ground that who's going to be around to make sure our family cemetery looks pristine for eternity. That first slide in my presentation, that cemetery was 112 years old.
Wow.
112 years.
Wow.
So.
Hey, Glenn.
Yes.
Speaking of the enslaved cemeteries,
yes.
Just a plug for another really neat Facebook group. It's called the Beyond Kin group.
Okay.
And they're basically collecting or having people contribute where reference to enslaved individuals is found, like in old chancery court records or what have you, the state settlements. People are contributing where they have information on these enslaved individuals or recently freed ones, that, you know, some of these cemeteries, like the lady in Indiana who are taking care of the cemetery, that would be another great source to perhaps post the records from the stones for a relative in California to suddenly say, oh my gosh, there's my great fourth grandfather.
Well, you brought up a very good point. You're going in to do these cemeteries, and you've done the best you possibly can as a volunteer. You've recorded it, you've done a basic mapping of the cemetery, and your little, you know, kindergarten sketch of the cemetery is so valuable. So valuable. You might think it's you know, nothing, but that document is a historic document now. And if you were to turn that over to a local historical society or the town, if the town has an archiving system, just, you know, pretty it up, put your name on it, put the year and the date that you recorded that information. If you've taken photographs of it and you want to print some photographs out, put it all in a binder, and then turn that over to the authorities who will make sure that that information is perpetually kept, and it will be accessible hundreds of years from now. I can't say it enough. It's all about recording now for what they're going to be researching 100, 200, 300 years from now. We're doing what we can.
Case in point, Glenn, we had a man in our county only back in 1965, and he did the same thing that you're doing.
Good.
He mapped all the little cemeteries and wrote down all the inscriptions and all the stones that he could. And I have a little book right now that I use. That's one that he did and turned into the Historical Society and also the library. Good. So those are the only records we have, you know, and it's great. I use it a lot when I'm trying to find people.
Perfect. An analogy that I use all the time is, you know, nature always wins. I say that a lot, but the fact that you always hear, oh, it's written in stone, that gravestone, it's written in stone. One, the information is not always correct. And two, time will pretty much take care of that stone, and, you know, it'll be gone. It will be gone. So you're recording something in our digital age that will be scanned and photographed and shared and all that. So the information is out there on the internet. And if the internet ever goes down permanently, I don't know what we would do. We would be a dysfunctional society. But that information is going to be retrievable hundreds of years from now. So do your best to record everything you can about that particular cemetery now.
Glenn, the law that we have in Maryland that covers access to cemeteries, is that something that's common in other states, or is that kind of a landmark?
That was a lot of work to be done by the people in Maryland to get that passed. And it came down to the minutia of like the words. And you'll notice that the law does say shall permit instead of will permit. And that's how that one phrase was, we had to give in and say, okay, we understand the owner shall give permission. Doesn't mean he has to, or they have to. So we did a lot of people, not me, I'm not taking credit for this law getting passed, but a lot of people I know worked for years to get this thing done. And no, it's not in every state, unfortunately. A lot of people have privacy issues about strangers coming onto their land and taking pictures and moving branches or limbs and digging up gravestones. What are they doing on my land? So you just have to be very forthright with the property owner. And if the property owner puts his hand up and says no, you walk away. That's it. You're done. There's no arguing. It's their property. So be aware. That happened, I think 4 times during the inventory process. All we were required to do for the inventory was get a GPS coordinate of where that cemetery is, take a photo approaching it, a photo in it, and walk away. And landowners were just 4 of them just said absolutely not. So it's people. It's how you approach them.
Virginia has it.
Do they really?
Yeah, but the law, the way it's worded, the access is aligned with the blood relative.
Yes.
And of course, getting permission.
Yes.
Because down where my dad's folks are from, down in Southwest Virginia, most folks are still carrying shotguns with them when they're out in the field. So you don't want to just walk out there.
Yeah. It says do not trespass at the front of the driveway.
They might think deer.
Yes, back it up.
Hey, Glenn, do you have rails to trails in Maryland? Like in Indiana, we've made a lot of hiking trails out of our old railroad system where the railroad tracks used to be.
Yes,
and they're all
we do
over.
have it.
Do you?
Yes.
Well, in the last few years, they passed a law here in Indiana because a lot of people own, they bought the railways and that property belongs to those people and they don't want to give it up for the trail because they're afraid somebody will walk down the trail and break a leg or something and then they could sue them. And so they passed a law, I don't know, a few years back, just for the trail system that it automatically is like a waiver, now no property owner has to worry about anybody that's gonna sue them if they get hurt on the trail, if they give their land up for the trail. Right. So I'm hoping that maybe in Indiana, we could get something like that similar passed for cemeteries. It would just be a blanket waiver for everybody. I don't know that we could ever get that done, but that would be a dream come true to me if we could get the same law passed for cemeteries that they have for the trails.
Speak to your local authorities. That's how Maryland's law passed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know where any other rails to trails are, but I know in Easton, Maryland, there's one because I walked it a lot.
Yeah, they're really nice. Yeah.
Well, if we have no further questions, I would like to just point out one more time that I put Glenn's email in the chat as well as a link to findagrave.com. And of course, if you have any questions later, you can email us at info@poolsvilleseniors.org and we will connect you with Glenn or try and help answer your question. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's presentation as much as I did. Always fabulous having Glenn and so much knowledge from so many different places. If you'd like to unmute and turn on your camera to say goodbye, now would be the time. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, please leave a like and a comment. We'd like to thank
Thank you,
Glenn
Glenn.
for this presentation,
Thank
as
you.
well as our ongoing sponsors and private contributors, because we love putting on our programs for you. This time next week, we'll be back with Tom Medema and Rally for Rangers, which is really interesting. Definitely check it out on our website. You can find it all at poolsvilleseniors.org. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks so much. Thank you always, Glenn.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Let us